Alrighty, hello and welcome to the Benzo Rehab Dungeon Religious Deconstruction episode number 8. These are really turning out to be more about spirituality and personal anecdotal sort of stuff than religious deconstruction necessarily.
I think that's probably a good thing
No,
because
it
you
is, yeah.
you want to avoid being one of those like angry over Star Wars YouTube atheists.
Definitely, and
You
that's
know,
part of why I
The
started
amazing
this
atheist.
series.
you're right.
Definitely part of why I started this series was, talking about religion in a way that, rejects the notion of structured religion, but also doesn't dismiss spirituality writ large, and also, understanding the human element of spirituality and that we need it, just not Christianity or, any other structured religion, especially the Abrahamic religions.
Excuse you, I'm a Gnostic, so I agree and disagree.
Okay, well, I'm not sure that. I'm not sure I said anything you should agree or disagree with, but
Yeah.
so there's kind of wanted to have this discussion, and I'm glad that you were able to join us today, Danko, whatever you're going by today.
Whatever.
Because you and I we lost a friend this last week, and it's kind of affected us pretty hard, I think.
Yeah.
This also being so close. My birthday is today, and so I've been ruminating and thinking life and death and grief and so.
Happy birthday, Mike.
Thank you. Yes, happiest of birthdays. It's weird that this is one of the first birthdays I think I've had in a long time where I wasn't like existential about another year.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I was talking to a friend of mine. I think all of us are in bad physical straits right now. I think everyone on the podcast right now is has some kind of hangover.
Yes.
But I had
spiritual hangover.
Spiritual, certainly. But yeah, I had a long conversation with a friend of mine I hadn't seen in years last night. And a lot of it was about this kind of stuff because he's in town for a wake. And yeah, one of the things that we were talking about is how at a certain point, the thing about grieving is it's different every time for everyone. But at a certain point, a certain type of grief will just erase all of your other problems.
Oh,
right?
that's very true.
Yeah,
in
good and bad ways. I mean, it's never ultimately good, I guess. But.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, I posted some kind of sad, depressive stuff on the Instagram when I learned about the passing of her. And you had reached out to me because we're bros, and you asked if I was okay, and really, I was probably the least like nobody should, through various periods of my life, people should have been very worried about me.
Yeah.
And in that moment when you messaged me, I was just like, no, I'm just sad. I'm not like in a position where I'm like going to do something bad to myself out of this sadness or anything like that. I just feel sad, and makes me more than anything want to keep existing because I'm seeing, the effect that our friend's passing has had on so many people. Because the community that we belong to is kind of a tight knit community, and these are people that we, nominally just kind of like shit post with every day. But out of those shit posts, we've come to love these people and appreciate their humor and their candor and their honesty about life and things that we talk about. So yeah, I think there is a point where so much grief can put you, maybe just erases the rest of your problems. That um and then like this process of grieving has been much different for me than previous times where you know maybe I've tried to ignore uh the pain that and instead this time I let myself really feel that pain and really just kind of go through the process, genuinely exploring my feelings and letting myself be angry at the situation and still uh loving of all the people that I have in my life. um and I'm very grateful for all the people I have in my and yeah, I don't know. I think on the subject of grieving, I think especially in America, and I'm not sure if this is true for other parts of the world, but it seems like we never give ourselves time to grieve. um and most of what we do is we find something to distract us from that grief, from the experience that we're having. I feel sad, so I'm going to do X instead of letting myself sit in that sadness and feel that sadness. um I don't know if you guys thoughts about that you'd like.
Yeah.
Go on,
Good.
Jacob.
Also, I mean, I think that's true, and I think it's unfortunate that the extent to which we do allow ourselves nominally to kind of sit with those feelings oftentimes are localized to the wake, the funeral, that the whatever, the reception, whatever, you know um and even then it is, I would hazard to guess that this is probably an issue specific to Christianity. I don't know too much about what it would be like, for Jews sitting Shiva, or Muslims practicing their funereal rites, but I think the kind of community that is convened around grieving uh, in Christian in those situations is it's not really about grief. It's like this weird kind of like, there's a commemoration of that person, but it's not so much. There is, I think, still some sort of taboo or something against actually like sort of effusively fully expressing and feeling that grief in those situations, because paradoxically it's like you're supposed to be happy, almost like you're supposed to like be remembering the good times or something, which is odd. It's,
Yeah.
if someone is gone, you should be able to really fully express and feel that void. um yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's awake is for the living, right?
Mhm.
It's I mean that's the old adage, but
Mhm.
it's important to keep in mind that yeah, I mean celebrating their life and everything, great, sure. That's something that should be done, but in the end, yeah, I agree that it's something that we focus on that kind of thing out of like a culture of toxic positivity, but
Mhm.
also out of just needing to avoid our own grief, because grief is I mean obviously painful, also makes you inefficient. And if you've ever been around someone, or if you've been someone that's grieving, around someone who isn't, right? If you've been in any one of these positions, it is extremely difficult to have any lines of communication. And people will deny their own grief as well, right? So at a funeral, maybe 20% of the people there are actually grieving. That's the number I pulled out of my ass. But a lot of the rest of them, though they should be grieving, though they should be mourning, are really kind of pushing a lot of it down for a lot of reasons. I mean, I've certainly been there. But if you see someone grieving, it can make you feel, at the very least, a kind of frustration, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it seems irrational. It seems oftentimes overreactive, as long as you don't think too hard about it. It's and it just gets in the way of everything. And so, yeah, there's always this weird pressure from all sorts of directions to not grieve because it's an inconvenience. And it's nuts.
Well, and I think, when people see other people grieving, or any time that somebody's, sad or feeling hurt or anything like that, there's this response in people to try to fix it.
Yeah.
And oftentimes grief isn't a thing that needs to be fixed. It's a part of,
Right.
and this plays into a larger conversation about things like depression and whatnot, where you know um that and I'm not against therapy, but there's been plenty of times in my life where I've been told, hey, you need to go to therapy because you're obviously depressed. And then when I'm like, yeah, my job is like horrible, I'm not making enough money to live, sort of stuff, I should be depressed in this moment because of that. And I think when you see people grieving, in our culture, there seems to be this notion that you're supposed to fix whatever's
Yeah.
hurting that person. And when you're trying to fix something, like, our friend is gone, and he can't be brought back, and there's nothing you can do to fix that situation. And anything that you try to do in the attempt to fix, the sadness and the sorrow and the grief that we're feeling, and this isn't, to shit on anybody or call anybody out, but it, because people mean well when they do this,
Yeah.
but it's
But then
you're
it
trying.
becomes more about the fixer than it does about the person who is
Absolutely.
mourning.
Absolutely, and you can't fix something like this, and it's something
No.
that you have to allow yourself to process and kind of
Right.
work your way
It-
through.
yeah, I think my perspective is, I think the greatest thing that someone could do is simply just to kind of uh bear witness,
Yeah.
because yeah, the especially being in that position, like whether it's mental health more generally, or like a specific instance of grieving or mourning, and being kind of imposed upon to fix yourself or pull yourself up by your bootstraps is insult to injury, really. I mean,
Yeah.
it's and it's not, it's genuinely, like 99% of the time it's not malicious. But I think, Dorian, I think you're right, there is a sort of negative reaction to a negative feeling or negative emotional state, where it's like it's annoying sometimes
Yeah.
to be around that. It's
Mm-hmm.
frustrating. I think you used the word frustrating, but it's like annoying to me is more pointed, because it's like, ugh, like I don't want to be, you know what I mean? Like it's
Right.
like, and I'm not gonna say like I've always been like, oh, like let me hold space for you. Like sometimes I am like fucking just power through. Like I don't want to hear about this shit. Like
Yeah.
I've got shit in my personal life right now where I've kind of like gradually cut a couple people off recently, or not out, but cut off, because I'm just like, it's the same shit, and but it is something. The thing is, it's something that's fixable, whereas this
Yeah.
obviously is a sort of non ameliorable situation. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. And grief is something that is inherently paradoxical, right? And we talked about this during the open workshop that we did most recently on melancholy. And grief is something that is about recursion, right? So something is lost and you bring it back, and then you feel love for it, and the love is something that's painful, which induces the loss again, which induces the bringing back. And so it's just this constant losing and regaining, and needing to not lose, and needing to not lose because it's lost, and loving because it's not present, and all of these different things coming together. And so it's not something that can be fixed. And in fact, fixing any one of these pieces ends up throwing everything into disarray, right? Like, you don't
It
want to
breaks the
stop loving,
chain.
right? And you don't want to stop loving someone you're grieving for, right?
Right.
And you can't stop grieving for someone that you love. And so it's this real, yeah, it's a mess that can't really be sorted out efficiently. It just needs to eventually kind of wind its way into being processed somewhere in the background of your psyche, I guess. And so all that you can do is give it time. And a lot of these things, I mean, I don't, and any grief that I've had that has culminated in real grief rather than being like, oh, that sucks, has always been something that uh, at the very most just goes in the background for a while. Like, these things always come back in one form or another. And so it's just, when you're dealing with someone that's grieving, you just kind of have to, yeah, like you said, hold space for them, but also acknowledge that it's probably come back. Like, it's never gone forever.
Yeah.
I had a girlfriend years ago. I had lost a friend
nice
of mine.
brag.
Yeah.
Yeah. This guy
No
fucks.
longer.
Wow.
But yeah,
Can I smell your fingers, bro?
you can smell my hair. But yeah, I had just lost someone. It had been about a week, and she ended up asking me, and this is something that's happened multiple times because it is fucking annoying, and so I'm not like really blaming her, but I was just like, yeah, I'm just still really bummed. And she's like, when are you gonna get over it? And it's like,
Probably never.
yeah, never, but certainly not yet. But yeah.
Yeah, if the grief is enough in intensity, then it's sort of an interminable wound. I mean, it like you're saying, it is this kind of feedback loop of yeah. I mean, it's emotionally picking a scab.
Yeah.
But the yeah, I mean, it's I think. But then I mean, I obviously I wasn't in the workshop, but I mean that is the problem though, is that if the intensity of the grief remains constant rather than being kind of shuffled into the lower reaches of the psyche, then it does form that melancholic loop where at that point it's sort of restructuring psychic and cognitive patterns and structures and such that you are, rather than running on just general sort of unqualified psychic force, you're running on needing that specific inflected bad force, I think. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, and I think like the inability, or like what you're saying, like, is if the intensity of that grief remains the same, I think that's kind of a byproduct of we ignore grief when we don't allow that part of ourselves to express itself fully, or we keep pushing that away. Then we're not allowing our, the grief is real, and we feel these things for real reasons. And if we try to, and it's just like any other, biological aspect of our bodies. If you hold your piss forever, you're
Yeah.
going to eventually either, piss yourself, or it's going to get so intolerable that you break down and you go to the bathroom, whatever.
Right.
But
Your bladder explodes.
your bladder
If you,
explodes,
yeah, I mean,
whatever.
if you hold your poops in, you can have a heart attack.
Yeah,
Hell yeah.
exactly.
It can kill you because it'll impact.
Um,
Ugh.
not to vulgarize this concept, but
Hey man,
I,
you invited me on. It was gonna go to
no,
poop
I
at
know,
some
and
point.
I just brought up piss, so that's
Yeah.
on me.
Should I bring up cum?
Yeah, piss and cum,
Jesus
and
Christ.
if you
Yeah.
never clear
As-
out the
as-
pipes, then there's
Then you have a grief wet dream and you wake up weeping.
but
Right.
just
I don't
It's when you
just
become a shooter.
the grief that we feel is it's part of a biological process to some degree, where if it's something that we try to ignore and we don't let ourselves express, and we don't into that grief in the proper way, then it's just something that builds up in us, and will necessarily come out in a harmful or explosive way, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think and without going into too much of a needless tangent on capitalism, but I feel like you know I'm not going to be able to make the funeral for our friend. He was in Texas, I'm in California. My economic situation over the last year has been pretty hit or miss, with taking a pay cut for COVID-19 budgetary reasons, et cetera, et cetera. And since I work for a public agency, there is some legitimacy to that kind of revenue hit that we took. It's not like all these companies that are like seeing huge amounts of profit gains and then also firing people because of COVID-19. But whatever. But like the economic strain that I have on me right now is preventing me from what traditionally is the method of grieving, which is going to the funeral, laying a person to rest, etc. And I think um we wouldn't be covering this subject fully if we didn't mention people's economic situations play so much into our inability to properly process grief.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
And I mean, certainly plays into the mental health issues that often lead to something like, either just stress damaging your body or someone committing suicide or whatnot, is all certainly related. And then having to like hide these things so you can be an efficient worker. Yeah.
Right. This sort of compulsory positivity,
Yeah.
Remaining plugged in, because I mean, if you're in the sense of like depression, like thinking of like a more like kind of comatose depression where you're in bed with the shutters drawn, like as an extreme, like a person like that can't be reached, they can't be made to work, produce, communicate. You're sort of just a black hole, like a self-enclosed kind of non-productive node in the network.
Right.
Yeah, and a little bit further on that point as well. We've been posting the fundraiser for our friend's family because they've gone through the traumatic event of losing a husband and father, and now the demand that they have on them to have finances, to have money to pay for food, clothing, housing, bills, etc. That demand hasn't gone away in recognition of what they just lost. It's still a pressure that pushes down on them, and again, does not allow them that time to properly grieve, to fully express the feelings that they're having for what they've lost.
And it also, I mean, this is sort of like a removed, but it also speaks to the I mean, the economic pressure to arrange yourself in a specific familial structure too, right? Like
Yep.
that in a very sort of mundane way of, tax cuts for married people or, claiming dependents, et cetera. Those are sort of positive reinforcements to arrange yourself in a family unit, but then there is also this sort of unfortunate negative um, enforcement of essentially being down a member of the team, but having that still having that same sort of lifestyle threshold or baseline. um, and I mean the unfortunate, and obviously I'm speaking generally here because I don't know this obviously the specifics of this individual and in the family, but I mean in general that it's such a gendered thing of if
Mhm.
it's the man who is suddenly out of the picture for whatever reason, then there's a incredible amount of institutional and kind of cultural barriers to that woman having to be both mother and breadwinner all of a sudden.
For sure.
Yeah, and I mean
Absolutely.
it's not like America has spent the last 100 years, championing the nuclear family,
Right.
specifically building this model that fathers, and also putting basic survival burden on um the idea of the bread. And obviously we know that that's a failed concept because more often than not both mother and father have to work now, wages are
Right.
etc. um yeah, yeah, I mean, yeah. um Kind of lost my train of thought, I think.
Mm.
So yeah, is there anything else that maybe we want to touch on specifically? I don't know. I think we did a pretty good job of covering this in a short amount of time.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be honest. I
Yeah,
just
you
had
do.
a
You
fucking
do have
migraine
to.
this whole time.
Yeah, you do have a heart out too. So,
I do also, but yeah, fuck it.
um, well, I think we will call it here unless somebody has something that they really want to say. I think I
I
got
was just
most of.
gonna
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I think the flip side of obviously that sort of um, potential melancholic relationship to the lost person, that constant kind of feedback of remembering the love, like, or the feeling, remembering the person that incites that feeling. There is a positive flip side or silver lining to that. Like, um, I in the sense that the memory of that person in their absence, um and I think this is probably would be particular to someone who is deceased rather than a lost love per se. um they sort of I would hope that they sort of attain a kind of, like, I don't know, like sainthood, I guess, in memory, like not in the sense of sort of whitewashing any of their flaws or whatever, but in the sense that they kind of um there's like a eternal sort of state that they have in memory, in a collective memory, because you know uh we're social animals,
Yeah.
so that memory is in that is, I mean, that is the beauty of a wake or whatever, or a sort of a homegoing ceremony or whatever, where you can kind of get that collective um affect or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I don't know. I think I think oftentimes too, it's so down to the specific circumstances.
Yeah. Oh,
So
absolutely.
Yeah.
yeah.
Take care of your friends and loved ones.
Yep.
Agreed. All right. Well,
Truly.
thank you very much for your time today. Um,
Thank you, sir.
both of you who have joined me on this and I'll do it. I hope my birthday wish is that both of you have very good days. And if you don't have a good day, you're literally shitting all over my birthday wish. So
I'm gonna
Good
go out
point.
and have a bad day just
just to spite
because.
me.
Yeah,
I'm asleep
nah.
through it.
Well, I love you both very much, and
Ditto, brother.
thank you, and
Hell yeah.
we will do this another time.
All right. Take care.
Hi, Michael Deebs here, with no gun pointed at my head. Please know that all content created for the Benzo Rehab Dungeon is and always will be freely available. However, if you would like to support this creation of content, we here at Camp Benzo would appreciate it, as the production itself is not free of cost. Anything donated will go to covering the various subscription fees maintained for content production or improving and expanding the content produced. If you are able to, please head on over to patreon.com/benzorehabdungeon. We also have shirts for sale on Teespring, all priced as low as we can get them without turning much or any profit. They are mostly so that you can show your loved ones that a necessary intervention may be on the horizon. Links to the merchandise storefront and our various social media profiles can be found on our link tree, which is the word link tr.ee/benzo rehab dungeon. As always, we love you. Please take your medicine.